Bulletstorm resides in a weird genre of games. It's a first-person shooter where the sole goal of the game is to move through wave after wave of enemies that you need to slaughter in order to accrue points to succeed in a skillshot system. It's also a comedy game that lampoons the traditional strongman shooty-dude antics and assumptions of those video games. There are three things about Bulletstorm that I'm going to talk about in this video. The first is the narrative structure and how it functions, the second is the skill shot system, and the third is the elephant in the room whenever this game comes up. Is Bulletstorm a successful satire of contemporary first-person shooter games? The past 15 years of shooter design have been dominated by two different design philosophies. The first is the corridor model, where the player moves through lanes of enemies and cover in a straight line toward her goal. This is the design of most Call of Duty games. The second is arena-based combat, where the player is unleashed into a zone where she needs to fight her way through enemies coming from many different angles, and this is the design of most Halo games. As the decades of this millennium progressed, these design elements cross-pollinated more and more, and by the time 2011 came around, there was a healthy intermingling of these philosophies in game products. The difficulty of these design philosophies has always been centered around how you chain them together. Whether it's hallways, arenas, or hallways that become arenas, there's always a narrative problem to be solved around how the player character moves from space to space. The Call of Duty games rely on global conspiracies, character switching, and a crack team of international operatives as a narrative structure to knit everything together. The Halo games use environments broken up by cutscenes or set-piece changes in order to make it all feel like a cohesive structure. Bulletstorm uses a method of narrative structure that we could call the oh shit blackout.
Wish like hell I didn't. Yeah, got it. Big Mama Bad Britches is off our ass. I'm glad to hear it, because we are going down. No.
At the end of nearly every sequence, we, through the eyes of protagonist Grayson Hunt, are so overwhelmed with what is happening to us that we black out. It makes for easy stapling. Characters who have passed out from physical trauma can be easily transported from one location to another, and it functions as a kind of localized amnesia. You were there, and now you're here. But this reveals a bigger narrative problem. How do you make the sections between blackouts cohere? In the Modern Warfare games, this grand connection is made through the conspiracy that everything you are seeing is somehow tied together. The Halo series remains consistent by developing its cast of characters and their motivations across many different scenes and locations. It would be a mistake to say that Bulletstorm doesn't rely heavily on its characters to get us through the game, but I think that the thing that gives Bulletstorm its narrative consistency is the planet Stygia, where most of the game takes place. We're told that the planet was once a vacation resort, but the locations we play in are all crumbling ruins. It's slowly revealed to us that Stygia has a complex history of radiation storms, a prison industrial complex, and a revolt that left many civilians and prisoners dead or mutated. This is all told to us primarily through environmentally triggered events. We watch two visually distinct gangs fighting with one another, and the game tells us why they're fighting. Giant mutants come to attack us, and we find out that they're the last remnants of the Vacationer class. The crowning achievement of this worldly consistency is Hekaton, a giant Godzilla-ish lizard that Hunt awakens from deep beneath Stygia. Early in the game, the player has no choice but to destroy dozens of giant eggs, which wakes some kind of monster that attempts to kill Hunt and his cyborg companion Ishi. They barely escape, and it seems like Hekaton disappears from the plot. Then, hours later, the Hekaton attacks a major city in order to get revenge on the player for her actions. Actions have consequences in this consistent world, and the past can sometimes come back to haunt you. The world of Stygia is consistent and coherent, and its stability conveys a similar consistency to the plot that would otherwise appear to be random locations peppered with different enemy types being shot at by slowly evolving characters. Narrative consistency is hard to manage in big giant video games, but just as difficult is making a shooting game that actually feels rewarding to play. Most contemporary shooters are little more than point-and-click journeys where you have to occasionally duck behind a crate to regain your health. At their most extreme difficulties, they are merely a swamp of brutalizing enemies whose positions you need to memorize. Most recently, innovations in shooter design have borrowed heavily from a roguelike or RPG design in order to generate new forms of interaction with shooter systems. Bulletstorm makes a sharp turn and instead borrows from classic arcade games and the shooters of the past in order to create what the game calls the skillshot system. This system evaluates the way that you have killed an enemy and rewards you points based on the difficulty or creativity of that particular method of murder. So, for example, if I kick an enemy into a cactus, I get X number of points, but if I throw them into the air and light them on fire, I will get Y number of points. If I do that, and then shoot them in the head, I will get even more points. The skillshot system is the ultimate expression of cynicism about games where you roam around killing people to get to the next checkpoint. The very design of the system rewards you for creative killing, and it all accumulates into points that you can spend on upgrades for guns that are largely unnecessary for doing anything other than enabling more creative ways to kill. It's boring and pointless. It offers nothing. And yet, here we are, endlessly murdering bad guys by shooting them in the butt for points. We can defend that cynicism by saying that the absurdity of that system is meant to be there. We can claim that it's all part of the satirical superstructure of Bulletstorm, and we would be right as far as the argument goes, but the claim that something is satire is not a universal excuse that liberates a work from any consequences. We can still evaluate whether Bulletstorm's satire is successful at delivering a critique of what it is presenting. When I first played the game sometime around release, I thought that this scene was hilarious.
You wanna make out? Just two gruff, military-hardened dudes sitting in an elevator, snuggling out their woes in a totally hetero way. That's a nervous chuckle. Either your human side gets the joke, or your computer side likes the way I look in these pants.
Or a little of both, perhaps.
Hey, I'm not judging. I'm just a good-looking man.
It's all right there. It's a clear satire of the super heterosociality of this entire genre of games. It was gently poking fun of itself. The game clearly saw itself as a commentary, and I found that commentary sufficient enough for a chuckle. Now, a few years later, I'm not so sure that this scene is doing much of anything at all. The comment comes from the safety of a game that relies on the tropes it is lampooning for most of the rest of its runtime. Another example is the character of Trishka. She's capable and smart and is continually wrangling other characters so that everyone can get off the planet together, and she's got a mouth like a sailor.
Hey! Identify yourself or I will open fire!
Oh, listen, lady! Please! We've been stuck here forever! Help us get an evac off-world!
Yeah? Go fuck yourself! You shitpiles give chase, I will kill your dicks!
What? What does that even mean? You're gonna kill my dick?
Trishka is meant to be a friendly foil for Grayson Hunt. She's much better than him at nearly everything, and she is quite literally the next generation of his elite unit Dead Echo. She's a superhuman soldier who is all about business, and a lot of the comedy beats that derive out of the interactions between Trishka and Hunt come from her pointing out how inept and clumsy he is. It's pretty clearly meant to be humor through subversion. The first-person shooter protagonist is a superhuman, and for him to be continually undermined at every turn by someone who is better than him at shooting things is a concentrated effort at reducing that superhumanness. Trishka and Hunt's companion Ishii both continually undermine Hunt merely through existing, and this throws the standard narrative of first-person power out the window. At the same time, Bulletstorm is trying to play both sides. It wants to undermine the traditional white masculine Superman by showing how much better equipped another character is, but it also plays into the trope of the badass woman who is revealed to be not quite as capable after all. The game wants to reveal how vapid the traditional shooter game is while also depending on the basic plot beats that make up that tradition. So while Trishka is a capable soldier, she is also framed to be ogled by the camera. Finally, near the end of the game, she's proved to be incompetent in a moment of crisis, and Hunt has the opportunity to play the hero. The satire of Bulletstorm has a reputation for being significant and deep, but very often looks more like an episode of a sitcom out of the last century. Like an episode of Everybody Loves Raymond or The King of Queens, Bulletstorm shows us a bumbling central character who is continually upstaged by everyone around him. At the same time, the conspiracy of plot keeps him at the center as a savior and as a solver, despite what reality would give you. Is it entertaining? Absolutely. We have half a century of sitcoms to prove that it makes people laugh. Is it progressive? Does it land in such a way that the satire really hits home and makes a social point? I don't think so. Bulletstorm is a complex object, and there's a million more things to say about it. The latter third of the game has a particularly biting Spec Ops style criticism of violence that I think is worth delving into. The game also has something to say about free will and cybernetics and the body. Overall, I think that Bulletstorm is worth thinking about in a lot of different ways, and I encourage you to go play it to form your own opinion about it. Thanks so much for watching, and have a great day.